Your head still feels heavy tonight, even after a full night's rest. That fog has a name, and a gentle mechanism built to wash it away. What happens inside the brain as you sink into deep sleep? The cleaning your mind needs most is the one it cannot start on purpose. It begins only when you stop. Welcome to Sleepy Science. In the deepest hours, something makes room where there was none, and a slow tide begins to move through the quiet. Let the weight behind your eyes loosen. Picture a clear stream drifting through narrow spaces, carrying the day's heaviness gently away. What moves through the sleeping brain is where our first quiet fact begins. Right now, as you rest, a clear liquid is moving slowly through the hollow spaces of your brain. It is called cerebrospinal fluid, and it looks almost like water, colorless, weightless, quietly circulating. At any single moment, each of us carries only about 5 ounces of it, yet it never fully stops. Scientists have studied this fluid for well over a century, mapping where it pools and how it drifts through the folds. And still, one gentle question has lingered beneath all that careful measuring. The question we will follow together tonight. What really happens inside the brain when you begin to sink into deep sleep? We will not answer it yet. For now, simply notice that something within you is already in motion. For most of medical history, the brain was thought to be a strange exception. Everywhere else in the body, a delicate network called the lymphatic system carries away waste. Tiny vessels that drain fluid, collect debris, and keep tissue clean. But when researchers looked at the brain, they found no such vessels threaded through it. So they assumed the brain simply had no drainage system of its own, that it must clean itself some other, quieter way. This puzzle sat unsolved for generations. It was a soft mystery, the kind that waits patiently in the background of textbooks. How does the most demanding organ we own take out its own trash for a long time? No one could quite say. Let us begin with the fluid itself, because it sits at the center of everything tonight. Cerebrospinal Fluid, often shortened to CSF, is a clear, gentle liquid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord. It is not blood, though it is drawn from it. Think of it as a filtered, purified bath, mostly water, with a little salt, sugar, and protein dissolved inside. It fills the spaces around the brain and seeps into 4 hollow chambers deep within it, called ventricles. This fluid is not still. It moves in slow, tidal pulses with each beat of your heart and each breath you take. Something so simple, so clear, and yet it does quiet work that keeps your entire nervous system alive. This clear fluid is made in a place with a lovely name, the choroid plexus. These are small, frilled tufts of tissue tucked inside the brain's hollow ventricles, rich with tiny blood vessels. Slowly and steadily, they filter plasma from your blood and release it as fresh cerebrospinal fluid. Across a full day, they produce roughly 17 fluid ounces, a little more than a pint. Yet your brain never holds all of that at once. Only about 4 to 5 ounces are present at any moment, which means the entire supply is quietly replaced several times each day. Old fluid drains away as new fluid arrives. It is a slow, patient turnover, refreshing the brain again and again, without you ever noticing. Cerebrospinal fluid does more than simply fill space. It holds your brain up. Your brain weighs about 3 pounds, roughly the weight of a small melon. If it rested directly on the base of your skull, its own weight would press down and injure the delicate tissue below. But the brain does not rest on bone. It floats, suspended in cerebrospinal fluid. Its effective weight drops to under 2 ounces, buoyed the way a swimmer feels light in water. This gentle floating cushions every small movement of your head, softening jolts and protecting the softest tissue you own. Each time you turn on your pillow tonight, your brain is drifting inside a quiet inner sea, held and unharmed. For an organ so soft and so protected, the brain is remarkably hungry. Though it makes up only about 2% of your body weight, it consumes close to 20% of your energy. That means 1/5 of every calorie, 1/5 of the oxygen you breathe, is spent inside your head. Billions of nerve cells stay busy sending signals, firing and resetting, thousands of times a second. All of this happens whether you are solving a problem or simply lying still in the dark. The brain never truly switches off. And here is the quiet consequence of such constant work. Like any engine that runs all day, it produces leftovers. Something must be done with what all that activity leaves behind. Every busy cell leaves a residue, and your brain cells are no exception. As neurons work through the day, they generate metabolic byproducts, the natural leftovers of energy being spent. Among them are small proteins with names you may have heard: amyloid beta and tau. There is also lactate, a molecule that gathers when cells burn fuel quickly, on their own, in small amounts. These are ordinary and harmless, the simple ash of a working mind. Think of them as the day's residue, settling softly into the spaces between your brain cells. But residue that is never cleared does not stay harmless forever. It lingers, it collects. And so the brain faces a gentle, constant task: to wash away today before tomorrow begins. So we return to the old puzzle, now a little sharper. The brain works harder than almost any tissue, produces waste like any working tissue. And yet, as far as anyone could see, it had no plumbing to carry that waste away. For decades, scientists offered careful guesses. Perhaps the waste simply diffused outward, drifting slowly through the tissue on its own. Perhaps individual cells broke down their own debris internally, quietly and privately. These ideas were reasonable and partly true, but they never felt like the whole answer. The brain's cleaning seemed too important to be left to slow, random, drifting alone. Something more organized had to be happening in the dark. The search for it would take a very long time. To understand the answer that eventually arrived, we need to meet the brain's quiet majority. When most of us imagine the brain, we picture neurons, the sparking cells that carry thought and sensation. But neurons are not alone. Woven among them are billions of other cells called glia, a word that comes from the Greek for glue. For a long time, glia were dismissed as mere packing material, filler that held the important cells in place. That view has softened greatly. We now see glia as active caretakers, feeding neurons, guarding them, insulating their wires, and, as it turns out, helping to keep them clean. The unglamorous helpers, it seems, were doing something remarkable all along. Among the glia, one kind stands out for our story tonight: the astrocyte. The name means star cell, and it fits. Under a microscope, an astrocyte spreads outward in many fine, branching arms, like a soft star drawn by a child. These are among the most abundant cells in your brain, and they are endlessly busy. Astrocytes tend to neurons the way careful gardeners tend a bed of flowers, supplying nutrients, balancing chemistry, mending small injuries. Their reaching arms touch both nerve cells and blood vessels, bridging the two. And it is precisely because they touch both worlds that astrocytes turned out to hold a hidden piece of the cleaning puzzle. These gentle stars are not decoration. They are part of the machinery of rest. Look closely at the tips of an astrocyte's reaching arms, and you find something exquisitely precise. Studded across those endings are tiny gateways called aquaporin, 4 channels, molecular doors built to let water pass through, and little else. Their name simply means water pour. These channels are not scattered at random. They cluster densely at the very tips of the astrocyte's arms, arranged with quiet intention. Through them, water can move swiftly from one side of the cell to the other, in whichever direction the tissue needs. It is a beautiful piece of design, worked out over millions of years. A cell that can open thousands of small doors and let water flow. Remember these doors. They will matter greatly when sleep arrives. Now notice where those water-rich arms actually reach. The tips of the astrocytes, the ones crowded with aquaporin, 4 channels, wrap themselves snugly around the brain's blood vessels. They form a nearly continuous sleeve, a soft, living wrapping, encircling the arteries and veins that thread through your brain. These specialized endings are called end feet, as though the cell were resting its feet against the vessel wall. The image is a tender one. Billions of star-shaped cells, each laying its arms upon the blood vessels, each door ready to pass water inward or outward. This close embrace is not accidental. By hugging the vessels, the astrocytes place their water channels exactly where fluid enters and leaves the brain. The stage, quietly, is being set. Here is where the hidden plumbing finally appears. Wherever a blood vessel dives into the brain, it does not press directly against the tissue. Instead, a thin, fluid-filled gap surrounds it. A narrow sleeve of space wrapped around the vessel like the lining inside a coat sleeve. Scientists call these perivascular spaces, meaning simply the spaces around the vessels. For a long time, they seemed like empty margins, mere gaps of no importance. But these sleeves turned out to be channels, pathways through which cerebrospinal fluid can travel, riding alongside the blood vessels as they branch deeper and deeper into the brain. The plumbing was there all along, hidden in plain sight, running quietly beside every artery, waiting for someone to notice what it was for. Now the pieces begin to move together. Cerebrospinal fluid, that clear tidal liquid, flows into the brain along those sleeves around the arteries. From there, guided by the astrocytes' water channels, it pushes inward, out of the sleeves and into the tissue itself, mingling with the fluid that already bathes the brain cells. This inner fluid, the one filling the tiny gaps between neurons, is called interstitial fluid. As fresh cerebrospinal fluid flows in, it stirs and sweeps this interstitial fluid along, carrying the day's dissolved residue with it toward drainage channels beside the veins. In, through, and out. A slow current that rinses the brain from the inside. It is less like scrubbing and more like a gentle tide, washing ashore clean. This whole system needed a name, and the name it received is a quiet piece of poetry. In 2012 and 2013, a research team led by Maiken Nedergaard and Jeffrey Iliff, working in Rochester, New York, described this fluid clearing network in detail for the first time. They called it the Glymphatic System. The word is a gentle blend. Lia, the caretaking cells, joined with lymphatic, the body's familiar drainage network. Glia plus lymphatic becomes glymphatic. It was a fitting name for a discovery that answered an old question. The brain does have a drainage system, but it is run by glial cells rather than by ordinary lymph vessels. What generations had wondered about finally had both a mechanism and a name. It is worth pausing on why that name matters so much. For over 100 years, the absence of visible lymph vessels in the brain was taken as settled fact. The brain was simply different, an organ that somehow managed without drainage. The glymphatic model gently overturned that assumption. It showed that the brain had not skipped drainage at all. It had simply built its own version, using astrocytes and their water channels in place of the vessels found elsewhere. The existence of this network, its anatomy, its plumbing along the vessels, these are now well established and widely accepted. That part of the story is solid ground. What remained, and what still stirs quiet debate today, was a subtler question about when this cleaning works best. And that question leads us, softly, towards sleep. To follow it, we should first understand what sleep actually is, because it is not one single state. Across the night, your brain moves through distinct stages, cycling gently between them. Scientists divide sleep into two broad kinds. REM sleep, where dreams mostly live, and non-REM sleep, which itself has three stages named N1, N2, and N3. You drift first into N1, the lightest doorway of sleep, where you can be woken by the smallest sound. Then into N2, a little deeper, as your heartbeat and breathing slow. Each stage has its own rhythm, its own signature in the brain. Tonight, one of these stages holds a special, quiet importance. The deepest of the non-REM stages is N3, known also as slow-wave sleep. It earns that name from what the brain's electrical activity looks like during it. In waking life, brain waves are fast and small, a busy flicker. But in slow-wave sleep, they grow long and slow and tall, rolling through the brain in great synchronized waves, like swells crossing a calm ocean. This is the deepest, most restorative stretch of the night, the sleep from which you are hardest to wake. It usually arrives most fully in the first hours after you drift off. Your body is at its stillest here, your mind at its quietest. If any moment were built for deep internal housekeeping, this slow, wave-washed stillness would seem the likeliest of all. Then there is REM sleep, the other great territory of the night. The letters stand for rapid eye movement, because beneath your closed lids, your eyes flick and dart as though watching something unseen. This is the stage where vivid dreaming most often unfolds. Curiously, during REM, your brain becomes almost as active as it is when you are awake, humming with energy, while your body lies still and softly paralyzed, unable to act out the dreams. REM and slow-wave sleep alternate through the night in cycles lasting roughly 90 minutes each, trading places again and again. Each stage does its own gentle work, but it is the slow, deep waves, not the dreaming, that first drew scientists toward the mystery of the brain's nighttime cleaning. Why should sleep matter at all for a plumbing system for a long time? No one thought it would. Cleaning seemed like background maintenance, the sort of thing a body could do at any hour. But a quiet suspicion began to grow among researchers. The brain, they noticed, seemed to guard its deepest sleep fiercely, as though something essential could only happen there. Something that waking hours, for all their length, could not provide. Deep sleep was not merely the absence of activity. It looked more like a different mode entirely, a state the brain arranged for on purpose. And so a fascinating possibility took shape. Perhaps the nighttime cleaning and the deep, slow waves of sleep were not two separate things, but one. Perhaps they needed each other. In 2013, a study offered the first real glimpse behind that suspicion. Working with sleeping mice, a team led by Lulu Shi, alongside Mike and Nedergaard, measured the tiny gaps between brain cells during sleep and during waking. What they found was quietly striking in its simplicity. As the mice slept, the spaces between their brain cells appeared to open wider, expanding by roughly 60% compared to the waking brain. The tissue seemed to loosen, like a crowd stepping apart to let a river through. And through those widened channels, cerebrospinal fluid appeared to move more freely, reaching places it could not easily reach while awake. It was a small study, in small animals, but it opened a door that researchers are still walking through today. Sit with that image for a moment, because it is a strange and lovely one. When the mice were awake, their brain tissue was crowded, its channels narrow, the fluid moving slowly and with effort. But as sleep arrived, the cells seemed to draw in, the spaces widened, and the clear fluid slipped through with a new ease, as if the brain were quietly making room. This is where the question we began with starts. Gently, to turn. We asked what really happens when you sink into deep sleep. Perhaps the sinking itself is the opening. Perhaps rest is not a pause in the brain's work, but the very posture in which its deepest cleaning becomes possible. We are not certain yet, but the question has quietly changed. Now, tenderly, we must be honest about where the science stands. That the glymphatic system exists. That cerebrospinal fluid flushes waste through those perivascular sleeves. This is real and widely accepted. But the further claim, that sleep specifically boosts this clearing, is where careful researchers still hold some open space. The 2013 findings gave rise to what is now the leading model. That deep sleep widens the brain's channels and speeds the washing through. Yet more recent work, in 2024 and 2025, has gently questioned exactly how much of the clearing depends on sleep itself. Scientists are still measuring, still comparing methods, still refining the picture. It is not a settled fact, but a living conversation. And there is something calming in a mystery still being tended. This quiet uncertainty touches something many of us carry into the dark. Among the waste the glymphatic system helps move is amyloid beta, the same small protein that, when it builds up over years, is associated with memory loss and the fog of aging. It is easy to lie awake with a heavy head and a tired mind and wonder whether something is slipping away. So let this be said softly and truly. The leading model suggests that sleep supports the clearing of such residue, and researchers are still measuring exactly how much. Nothing here asks you to worry tonight. If anything, it offers the opposite, the sense that simply by resting, you are letting an ancient, patient process do quiet work on your behalf. So gather what these first facts have shown, not as a list, but as a single shifting picture. The brain, once thought to have no drainage at all, turns out to keep a gentle river running through it. Clear, fluid, guided by star-shaped cells, washing along the vessels. And the question we opened has quietly deepened. We began by asking what happens when you sink into deep sleep. Now we can feel the outline of a stranger idea, that the sinking and the cleansing may be woven together. That stillness may be where the brain does its most careful work. What we have not yet touched is how the sleeping brain actually makes that room to open the way. That is where the next stretch begins. You've been with us for a while now, and your breathing has likely softened without you noticing. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind find this sanctuary too. Now, let's pause together, one sleepy soul at a time. The widening you just heard about is not only a story about mice in a laboratory. Something like it may be settling through you, in the quiet behind your closed eyes. Notice how still your body has become. The pressing thoughts, the tension held in your jaw and shoulders, are beginning to loosen, the way brain tissue loosens to let the fluid through. You do not have to do anything to make room. You are already making it. Let the fluid of rest move as it will. It knows the way. Feel the weight of your head against the pillow, held and floating at once. The washing has already begun. Let the next breath carry you deeper into it. In 2019, researchers at Boston University watched the sleeping human brain and measured something few had ever caught so directly. As volunteers drifted into deep, dreamless sleep, waves of cerebrospinal fluid began washing rhythmically into the brain, rising and easing back every 20 seconds or so. This was not a faint trickle, but a slow, pulsing tide, large enough to see clearly on the scans. It appeared mostly once sleep had settled in. During quiet wakefulness, the fluid stayed comparatively still. The leading interpretation is that deep sleep opens a rhythm the waking brain does not carry, a gentle washing that seems to belong to the night. What made these waves so fascinating was their timing. Each surge of fluid did not arrive at random. It followed, in a slow and orderly sequence, the large electrical slow waves that mark deep sleep, the same gentle, rolling activity that spreads across resting neurons. First, the neurons grew quiet together. Then, the volume of blood in the brain eased and receded very slightly. And into the space that briefly opened, the cerebrospinal fluid flowed. Electrical calm, a softening of blood, then a wash of fluid, one following the other, over and over through the dark, like three instruments keeping a slow and shared tempo that no one had to conduct. Through the day, a chemical messenger called norepinephrine keeps you alert and ready, holding your blood vessels at a steady, watchful tension. As you settle into deep sleep, its levels quietly fall away. And here the question we began with starts to turn. We set out asking what happens inside the brain as it sinks into sleep. Yet the deeper pattern seems to be that the washing begins precisely because the signal for alertness lets go. Researchers are still mapping exactly how much this matters. But in the leading model, it is the fading of readiness, not any effort of yours, that allows the slow tide to move at all. As norepinephrine recedes, the walls of the brain's small blood vessels begin a slow rhythm of their own. This is called vasomotion, a gentle widening and narrowing of the vessels, far slower than a heartbeat, unfolding over many seconds. In the leading picture, these slow swells act a little like a hand smoothing along a hose, nudging fluid forward through the thin channels that sleeve each vessel. It is not a forceful pump, but a soft, tidal pulsing, the kind of motion you would barely notice, even if you could feel it. And the quieter the brain becomes, the more freely this unhurried rhythm seems able to move through it. Not all sleep appears to share this washing equally. The rhythm seems tied most closely to the deepest stage, the slow-wave sleep that tends to arrive in the earlier part of the night. In lighter sleep, the electrical slow waves are smaller and less synchronized, and the great tidal surges of fluid become harder to find. It is in the deep, coordinated calm, when large populations of neurons fall silent together, that the clearest waves appear. Researchers are still measuring how much of the night's clearing truly depends on this stage. Yet the pattern gently suggests that the deepest hours carry a quality. The lighter ones simply do not. The slow tide of vasomotion is only one of several rhythms that keep this fluid in motion. Another is far more familiar: the beating of your own heart. With each pulse, the arteries swell very slightly and then relax, and that small expansion presses gently on the fluid in the thin sleeves surrounding them. All night long, this steady pulse sends faint ripples through the channels of the brain, a movement so constant you have never once had to notice it. It is a quiet reminder that the same heartbeat carrying you through the day keeps working softly through the night, helping to stir the fluid along its patient course. Breathing adds a rhythm of its own. As you draw a breath in and let it go, pressure shifts gently inside the chest, and those shifts reach all the way up into the spaces around the brain and spinal cord. Each slow breath nudges the cerebrospinal fluid, drawing it and releasing it in a cycle even longer and calmer than the heartbeat. In deep sleep, when breathing grows even and unhurried, this rhythm becomes especially smooth. So the fluid does not move by any single force, but by several gentle rhythms layered together. And the slow, settled breathing of sleep may be among the calmest of them all. Picture these three motions overlapping in the dark: the quick, light tap of the heartbeat, the slower rise and fall of the breath, and beneath them both, the long tidal swell of vasomotion as the vessels sway. Each moves at its own pace, and together they keep the fluid from ever falling completely still. In the waking brain, the fast alert signals tend to hold the vessels tighter, dampening the slowest rhythm. In deep sleep, with that tension released, the long vasomotion waves grow fuller, and the leading view is that these slow swells do much of the work of carrying fluid in the greatest distance through the tissue. There is one more piece to how the fluid finds its way. The brain is threaded with cells called astrocytes, patient, star-shaped cells that wrap their endings snugly around the blood vessels. Studded across those endings sit tiny water channels called aquaporin 4, each small enough to let water molecules slip through almost one at a time. These channels work as gentle doorways, allowing fluid to pass between the vessel sleeves and the tissue beyond. Without them, the water would face a far harder path. They are among the smallest details in this whole quiet system. Yet the smooth washing of the brain seems to depend on them being exactly where they belong. What appears to matter is not only that these water channels exist, but where they sit. In a healthy brain, aquaporin foregathers most densely on the very face of the astrocyte where it meets the blood vessel. A tidy arrangement scientists call polarization. Positioned there, the channels line the fluid's route right where it needs to flow. When that arrangement drifts and the channels scatter across the cell, the smooth movement seems to falter. It is a delicate kind of order, like doorways set carefully along a single hallway rather than scattered through the walls. Small, easy to overlook, yet part of how the night keeps the passage clear. Return for a moment to that widening, because there is a quiet mechanism behind it worth understanding. The leading explanation is that the brain cells themselves draw in slightly as sleep deepens, each one shrinking by a small degree, and together making the gaps around them grow. Nothing pushes the spaces open. They simply appear as the cells step back. The way a crowd loosens when everyone eases half a pace apart. It is the same loosening the 2013 mouse study measured, seen now from the inside. Whether the human brain opens by quite that same margin is still being studied. But the idea it points to stays simple. In sleep, the crowded spaces of the mind seem to ease apart, and the fluid finds more room to move. That extra room may matter more than it first appears. When the spaces between cells are narrow, fluid meets resistance. The way water slows as it seeps through tightly packed sand. Widen those spaces even a little, and the resistance drops. So the same gentle rhythms can carry fluid farther and more freely into the tissue. In this picture, deep sleep does two things at once. It releases the slow vasomotion that moves the fluid, and it opens the channels through which that fluid must travel. The rhythm and the room arrive together, and in the leading model. That pairing is much of what lets the washing reach so deep. It is a gentle reversal of how we once pictured the resting brain. For a long time, sleep was imagined mostly as the mind switching off, a dark and empty pause. The newer picture is almost the opposite. Through the day, the waking brain is busy and, in a sense, crowded, its narrow spaces pressed close by constant activity. At night, that crowding eases. The vessels sway more slowly. The channels open. The fluid moves. Sleep, in this view, is not the brain going quiet and doing nothing at all. It is the brain shifting into a different kind of work. The slow, unhurried labor of tending itself. Somewhere in the last few minutes, your attention may have loosened its grip, the details of vessels and channels blurring softly into the sound of the words rather than their meaning. That is exactly right. The same easing we have been describing, the quiet release of the day's tension, is welcome to happen in you now. Let one slow breath move through, unforced, the way the fluid moves without ever being told. There is nothing here you need to follow closely. When you are ready, we drift on together, gently, toward what all this movement might feel like. If you could sense all these rhythms at once, they might feel less like machinery and more like a tide. A tide asks nothing of the shore. It simply arrives, draws back, and arrives again. And over many quiet returns, it leaves the sand a little cleaner than before. Something similar seems to unfold in the sleeping brain. Wave after slow wave of fluid moving through, carrying away a little of the day's residue each time it recedes. You do not have to steer it or hurry it along. In the deep hours, the washing keeps its own patient rhythm, returning and returning while you simply rest. So the movement we have been tracing is not one push, but a gathering of gentle forces. Alertness fading, vessels swaying, breath and heartbeat rippling through, spaces easing open, small doorways set carefully in place. Each one on its own is faint. Together, across the deep hours, they keep a slow current flowing where the waking day allows only stillness. And this opens the next quiet question. Where does all that gathered fluid actually go? And what does it carry away as it withdraws? That is the path the coming hour follows, drifting deeper into the brain's unhurried housekeeping. Among the substances the brain sets aside as waste are two proteins with quiet names: amyloid beta and tau. During an ordinary day of thinking, small amounts accumulate, the natural residue of busy, firing cells. Researchers have long noticed that when these proteins gather and clump over many years, their presence tends to appear alongside Alzheimer's disease. It helps to hold this softly. Finding a little of these proteins is normal and expected in every living brain. It is their slow, unattended pileup across decades that scientists study. For now, simply know the brain has a name for what it tidies away each night. Clearing amyloid beta and tau is one thread in the larger glymphatic story you have been hearing tonight. As cerebrospinal fluid moves along the channels beside blood vessels and washes through the widened spaces between cells, it appears to carry a portion of these proteins away with the rest of the day's residue. The brain has more than one way to handle them. Enzymes break some down where they sit. Yet this gentle nighttime rinse looks like a meaningful helper. Think of it less as scrubbing and more as a slow current, loosening what has settled and letting it drift quietly toward the exits. Curiosity led researchers to ask what happens after a single short night. In a 2018 study led by Ehsan Chokri-Kajori, healthy adults who missed one night of sleep showed a modest rise in amyloid beta in certain brain regions, measured by scans the following morning. It is worth reading this gently rather than gravely. One study, one night, a small change that the body has many chances to settle again. This is evidence that the system leans on rest, not a verdict about any single evening. The takeaway is kind. The brain seems to do some of its quiet tidying while you sleep. A companion finding from a 2019 study by Gerholth and colleagues looked at tau in both mice and people. A longer stretch of wakefulness was associated with higher levels of tau moving through the fluid around the brain. Here the question we opened tonight: what truly happens as you sink into deep sleep? begins to lean towards something more tender. Not only how the brain rinses itself, but why that rinsing might matter to you. Hold the finding loosely. It is early and still debated among scientists. What it gently offers is a reason to think of rest as care the brain gives itself, freely. Something else shifts across the passing years. Several studies suggest that glymphatic flow, the ease with which fluid moves through those channels and clears the spaces between cells, tends to become slower as we age. Rather than reading this as loss, it may be kinder to read it as a reason rest earns a little more tenderness over time. The system still works. It simply appreciates being given the room to. An older brain that sleeps well is offering itself the same nightly rinse it always did, perhaps just at a gentler, more unhurried pace. There is nothing to fix here, only something to allow. In 2015, 2 research teams, one led by Antoine Louveau, another by Alexandre Aspelund, described something textbooks had missed for a century: true lymphatic vessels running through the meninges, the protective layers wrapping the brain. These slender channels act like exit pipes. Fluid and the waste it carries can drain out of the skull along them, heading toward the body's wider cleanup network. For a long time, the brain was thought to have no such plumbing at all. Learning that it does have quiet drainage of its own adds a reassuring completeness to the picture. The rinse has somewhere gentle to go. Follow those meningeal vessels and they lead, eventually, toward lymph nodes in the neck. This is where the brain's used fluid joins the same slow, patient system that filters the rest of the body. What began as cerebrospinal fluid, sweeping between your brain cells in the deep hours, drains downward and outward to be sorted and cleared far from the skull. It is a tiddy, unglamorous journey, and it asks nothing of you. Somewhere below your jaw, right now, small stations stand ready to receive whatever the night loosens, part of a housekeeping loop that has been running your whole life. This drainage seems to matter beyond ordinary nights. 2. After a concussion or other mild brain injury, researchers have observed that glymphatic clearance can become sluggish for a while, which is one reason rest is so often part of gentle recovery. There is no need to read anything worrying into this. It simply fits the pattern the whole night has traced. When the brain needs to set things right, quiet and sleep tend to help it along. The body knows this instinctively. It makes us drowsy when we are healing. Rest, once again, turns out to be quietly on your side. A similar thread appears in studies of stroke recovery. When blood flow is interrupted, the spaces the fluid normally travels through can be disturbed, and researchers are exploring how supporting the brain's natural clearance might aid healing. Keep this light. It is an area still being gently mapped, not a warning to carry. The thread that runs through all of it is quietly hopeful. Again and again, the brain's own washing system turns out to be a partner in repair. You do not have to understand the mechanism for it to work. It has been tending to you faithfully, night after night, without ever being asked. You have just heard the brain described as something that can slow, that can be hurt, that leans on rest to mend. And if some part of you tightened at that, quietly worried the mind might not keep pace with the years, let that worry be met kindly here. Notice your breath as it is right now, unhurried, doing its work without any instruction from you, the same way the clearing does. There is nothing tonight you have to protect or prove. Let your shoulders give a little more of their weight to whatever holds you. What comes next asks even less of you than this. Here is the gentlest way to hold everything the night has offered. This clearing, this quiet rinse through the spaces of the brain, is not an exam you sit each night and might fail. It is a kindness the body performs on its own, the way it beats your heart and heals a scrape, without needing your effort, your worry, or your permission. Some nights are shorter, some years are slower, and still the system keeps tending to you as best it can. You are not falling behind by resting. You are simply letting a faithful, ancient housekeeping do the thing it has always done. And there is one more part of that housekeeping still to meet. A small cluster near the base of the brain, whose fading signal in the hour ahead will turn out to set this whole slow tide in motion. For most of the day, a small cluster of cells near the base of the brain keeps you alert by releasing a messenger called norepinephrine. It sharpens attention and holds the blood vessels in a state of gentle tension. Recent work suggests this same messenger has a quieter role at night. As sleep deepens, its release does not simply switch off. Instead, it begins to rise and fall in slow, unhurried waves. And those waves appear to matter for the way fluid moves through the resting brain, long after the day's alertness has faded. The cluster is called the locus coeruleus, a name meaning the blue place, for the faint color it shows under a microscope. Though it is tiny, its fibers reach nearly everywhere, which is why its signal can touch attention, mood, and the tone of blood vessels all at once. While you are awake and engaged, it fires steadily, keeping vessels a little constricted. That steady tension is part of what being alert feels like from the inside, even when you never notice it holding you. In non-REM sleep, that steady firing softens into a slow rhythm. Roughly every 50 seconds, norepinephrine levels drift up and then ease back down, and the blood vessels follow along. They widen a little, then narrow a little, in a calm and repeating cycle. Researchers describe this as vasomotion, a slow, self-driven motion of the vessel walls. It is not the quick pulse of your heartbeat. It is something slower and gentler, closer to the rise and fall of quiet breathing than to any effortful work the body has to perform. A 2025 study in the journal Cell followed these slow waves closely in sleeping mice. The researchers found that as vessels widened and narrowed in time with the norepinephrine rhythm, they seemed to act like a soft, slow pump. Each gentle squeeze helped move cerebrospinal fluid along the spaces that wrap around the brain's vessels. In their picture, The fluid did not need to be pushed by any single strong force. It was coaxed forward, little by little, by a rhythm the sleeping brain produces quietly on its own. There is a quiet logic to why this rhythm belongs to sleep. While you are awake and watchful, the steady norepinephrine signal keeps the vessels in a tenser, more constricted tone, and the slow waves cannot fully form. Letting go of alertness is, in a sense, what lowers that signal enough for the slow rhythm to appear. The pump does not begin because you decide to rest. It becomes possible only once the part of you that stays on guard finally loosens its hold and lets the tension drain away. This is a gentle thing to sit with, especially on a night when the mind keeps circling. The very state that lets the brain begin its slow washing is the one you cannot force. Trying harder to relax tends to keep the alert signal raised, which is the opposite of what allows the rhythm to settle. It helps to know that the loosening is not a task you are failing at. It is something that arrives on its own, in its own time, once the reaching quietly stops for the night. All of this describes a picture that is still being drawn. Watching fluid move through a living brain is one of the harder things in this field, and much of the clearest evidence still comes from mice, whose brains are small and reachable in ways a human brain is not. That gap between the animal work and the human experience is part of why careful scientists hold their conclusions loosely. The rhythm is real and measurable in the lab. What it means for your own night is still being mapped. Around 2024, researchers reached a quiet milestone. For the first time, they were able to image the fluid-filled channels that wrap the vessels in living human brains, not only in animals. Using refined magnetic resonance methods, they could begin to see the spaces where this slow washing is thought to happen. It was a modest, patient kind of progress, the sort that rarely makes headlines. But it mattered, because so much of the earlier story had come from creatures far smaller than us. And here at last was a human glimpse. Seeing these channels at all is difficult for reasons worth appreciating. The spaces are narrow. The fluid is nearly invisible, and the brain sits shielded inside the skull, moving faintly with every heartbeat and breath. To follow fluid deep inside without disturbing it, researchers rely on faint contrast, careful timing, and a great deal of mathematics to separate true signal from noise. Small differences in method can lead to different readings. This is not a flaw in the science so much as the honest texture of studying something so quiet and so deep. Because the measurements are so delicate, the field holds a genuine, open question at its center. In 2024, a separate group of researchers, working in mice, used a different technique, tracking a fluorescent marker as it moved through the brain, and reached a reading that ran against the earlier picture. By their measure, the sleeping and anesthetized brain appeared to clear that marker more slowly, not faster. It was a careful study, and it did not fit the tidy story that sleep is simply the time when the washing speeds up. Like so much of this work, it was done in mice. One more reminder of how much of the picture is still drawn from small animals. That finding landed as a real puzzle rather than a footnote. For years, the working idea had been that deep sleep opens the flow and lets the day's waste drain away more freely. Here was evidence, gathered thoughtfully, pointing the other way. It did not prove the cleaning does not happen. It suggested that how we measure the flow can shape what we think we see, and that the timing of the brain's housekeeping may be more subtle than a simple switch that turns on the moment night arrives. What followed was the ordinary, healthy work of science disagreeing with itself in the open. The question came down partly to method. Does the marker a study uses move the same way the natural fluid does? And does measuring it change the very flow you hope to observe? Two careful teams, using two different tools, had arrived at two different readings. Neither could be waved away. That kind of tension is not a sign that the field is broken. It is how a young field slowly finds its footing over time. The researchers behind the original picture, among them Mike and Nedergaard, whose lab first described this nighttime washing, questioned the newer study's approach. Their concern was technical and fair-minded, that the particular marker and method used might understate a flow that is genuinely there. They did not claim certainty. They argued that the tools had to be matched carefully to the delicate thing being measured. The exchange stayed within the bounds of careful science, a disagreement about how to look, not a quarrel about whether the brain cleans itself at all. At a large sleep research meeting in 2025, the two sides were set side by side in a featured discussion, so the field could weigh the evidence together in the open. Rather than declaring a winner, the gathering did something quieter and more useful. It laid out clearly what is known, what is contested, and what better tools might settle in the years ahead. There is a certain calm in watching thoughtful people hold an unfinished question without rushing it. The washing is real. Its exact timing is still being learned. Adding one more gentle wrinkle. Some measurements hint that the brain may clear waste efficiently even during quiet, restful wakefulness, the settled, undemanding kind, not busy concentration. If that holds, then deep sleep might be one especially good setting for this housekeeping, rather than the only one. The tender state that matters may be less about sleep itself and more about a certain letting go that sleep reliably brings. It is a soft idea, still forming, and a reminder that rest can wear more than one quiet face. Held together, these threads describe a field mid-discovery, and there is something restful in seeing it that way. Scientists are still mapping exactly when the brain cleans itself, and how much, and under which conditions the flow runs best. None of the open questions undoes the core finding. The brain has a fluid system that tends its own upkeep. The uncertainty sits at the edges, in the timing and the amounts. You can let that uncertainty be a kind of wonder tonight, rather than one more thing to resolve before sleep. Alongside the frontier questions, some gentler and steadier threads have emerged, and they are worth holding lightly rather than as instructions. Keeping a fairly regular sleep schedule appears to support the body's daily rhythms, and those rhythms shape when the slow nighttime processes tend to unfold. Nothing here asks for perfection or a rigid clock. It is closer to the ease of returning to sleep at roughly familiar hours. So the body knows, without being told, that the quiet part of the day is coming near again. Hydration is another soft thread in this picture. The fluid that moves through these spaces is mostly water, drawn from the body's larger supply. So being reasonably hydrated across the day is thought to give that quiet system what it works with. There is no clock to drink by, and no reason to wake yourself for water in the night. Picture instead an ordinary day with a glass here and there. A body kept gently watered the way a garden is. Not flooded, just never left parched. And the slow tide of the night has all it needs to move. Physical movement during daylight has also drawn interest. In animal studies, regular activity has been linked with livelier fluid flow through the brain's spaces, though the picture in people is still being filled in. What matters here is unhurried and cumulative. A walk, a stretch, the ordinary motion of a day spent not entirely still. None of it needs to be strenuous to count. The body that has moved gently through its day seems to settle more readily into the slow rhythms that belong to the night. Some things appear to blunt this flow, and alcohol is among the most studied. In moderate to heavy amounts, it seems to interfere with the brain's fluid clearance and to fragment the deep stages of sleep where the slow rhythm lives. You do not have to do anything with that tonight. If it lands anywhere, let it land softly, as a small reason the plain, undisturbed night is worth its quiet, since it is precisely in unbroken deep sleep that the washing runs most freely of all. Other disruptions of sleep seem to dull the flow in similar ways. When deep sleep is broken repeatedly, by noise, by breathing that stutters through the night, by a mind that keeps surfacing, the slow rhythm has less unbroken time to do its patient work. So what does the system quietly ask for? Only the plainest kindness. A dim, settled space where the deep stretches can lengthen and hold. Not vigilance in the dark, which only lifts the alert signal higher. Just the gentle arranging of a room where sleep is free to deepen. Even the position of the body during sleep has been studied. In experiments with animals, lying on the side appeared to let fluid move through the brain's spaces a little more freely than lying flat on the back, though whether this carries over to people is not yet settled. It is a small and tentative finding, offered here only as a curiosity. There is no perfect posture to hold yourself in. The body tends to find its own way through the night, shifting as it needs, without any managing from you. Step back from the details, and a single idea has been quietly assembling all along. The brain's cleaning is not an action you carry out. It is something you permit. Cells draw in a little. The spaces around them open. Norepinephrine eases into its slow waves, and the fluid begins its unhurried tide. And every part of that unfolds only once you stop steering. The washing the mind needs most turns out to be the one thing effort cannot start. It waits on the far side of letting go. Seen this way, the fear that sits behind a heavy head, that the fog will not lift, that something is being lost, meets a quieter answer. The upkeep does not depend on your vigilance. It does not need you to hold the day together or to earn your rest by staying strong. It runs on a rhythm older than any worry, one that begins precisely when the holding on ends. You are not required to do the cleaning yourself. You are only asked, in the end, to allow it. And so the gentle gift of this system is that it asks for nothing but your absence from the controls. There is no technique to master, no effort that would help, no part of it that goes better because you tried. The tide moves because you finally stopped moving. The rooms of the mind are tended because you left them quiet. Everything the night does for you, it does in the space you make by ceasing, by setting down. For a while, the whole idea that you have to keep watch. Somewhere beneath thought, that slow tide is already moving, rising and easing on its own, needing no hand to guide it, no watching to keep it going. What the night has been showing, piece by piece, gathers now into one quiet certainty. You were never the one keeping yourself clear. So you can loosen the grip that holds you together. There is nothing here to begin, nothing to finish. Let the breath go long. The last of the way asks only that you stay soft, and let the tide carry what you no longer need to hold. There is a kind of tending that asks nothing of you. While you drift, the fluid moves through the narrow spaces of your brain, washing the day loose without a single instruction. You do not have to watch it. You do not have to help. The work goes on in the dark, gentle and unhurried, the way a slow stream smooths a stone. Your only task tonight is to let go and be carried. A heavy head is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is the day asking to be set down. All those hours of thinking and holding and trying leave a weight behind, and the weight is simply what the brain has not yet cleared. Feeling it means the cleaning is needed, not that you have failed. Tonight, that heaviness is not a burden to carry. It is a door beginning to open. Somewhere in the quiet, a rinsing is underway. Think of a window pane after a soft rain, the film of dust gone, the light coming through a little clearer. That is close to what deep sleep does inside the skull. Not scrubbing, not effort, just a slow flow moving over everything the day left behind. You may wake tomorrow feeling washed without ever knowing when it happened. Let the rinsing find you where you are. The cleaning cannot be willed. It begins only in the moment you stop trying to make it begin. This is the tender truth of the whole night. The more you reach for rest, the further it drifts. And the instant you release the reaching, the tide is free to move. Effort is the one thing that holds it back. So let effort be the first thing you set down, and let the rest follow on its own. Picture the morning as a page rinsed clean overnight. Yesterday's marks softened, the surface ready again. That is what the brain offers when its channels have run clear until dawn. you are not meant to carry every line forward. Much of it was meant to be washed away, so the new day meets a mind with room to write on. Tonight, you do not have to keep the page full. You are allowed a clean one. Fog does not lift because you push against it. It lifts because the air quietly changes underneath it. The heaviness behind your eyes is much the same. It clears not through force, but through the slow work of the night moving through you. There is nothing to solve, nothing to fix. There is only a mist that thins on its own as the hours pass. Let it thin. You do not have to lift it yourself. In the leading model of how this works, the spaces between your brain cells widen as you sink into deep sleep, opening just enough for the fluid to pass. Researchers are still mapping exactly how much they open, and exactly how. But you do not need the numbers tonight. You need only the feeling of it. A quiet making of room, a loosening in the dark, space appearing where the day had left none. As alertness lets go, a chemical of watchfulness begins to fall. It is called norepinephrine, the signal that keeps you scanning and ready through the day. When you finally rest, it drains toward its lowest point, and the falling is what lets the tide rise. You do not lower it by trying. It falls because you have stopped adding to it. Each breath you release lets a little more of the watching go quiet. If you have ever feared your memory slipping, let this soften that fear a little. The night is not stealing from you. It is tending what you hold, clearing away the debris that would otherwise gather around your thoughts. Forgetting the small and clutter is how the brain keeps room for what matters. The nightly rinse is not loss. It is care. What deserves to stay is being protected, quietly, while you sleep. Sleep is a form of trust you practice every single night, whether you notice it or not. You lie down and hand yourself over to a process you cannot see and do not control. And every morning it gives you back, a little lighter. That trust is not naive. It is earned by 10,000 nights that kept their promise. So trust it once more tonight. Let go of the watching, and let yourself be kept. The brain does not wait to be asked before it begins to heal. The moment you stop directing it, the clearing starts on its own. The way water finds the low places without being told where to go. You spend the day deciding everything. Now you can decide nothing. The system that tends you needs no permission and no plan. Let the deciding fall quiet, and let the quiet do what it has always known how to do. You cannot force this the way you cannot force a tide. You can only stop standing in its way. All day you held things together with effort, and effort served you well. But here, at the edge of sleep, effort is the one thing that no longer helps. The releasing is the whole of it. Loosen your grip on the hours, on the tasks, on the trying, and feel how the letting go is itself the rest. Imagine a slow stream threading through the quiet rooms of your mind, carrying the day's small heaviness gently out. It does not rush. It does not strain. It simply moves, the way water always moves towards stillness. You are not the one guiding it. You are the ground it flows across, softening as it passes. Let the image carry you. There is a current in you tonight, and its only direction is toward peace. The clarity you feel some mornings was never something you earned. It was given, quietly, in the hours you were not awake to see it. A mind that meets the day clear is a mind that was tended in the dark. You did not do it. You allowed it. And that is enough. Tonight you are not working toward tomorrow's clearness. You are simply lying down and letting the gift be prepared without your effort. Every night offers the same fresh beginning, no matter how full the day was. In the leading picture, the channels open, the fluid moves, and whatever gathered is loosened and carried away. So morning arrives less crowded. You do not have to hold on to today to keep it. What matters is already kept. What weighs is already easing. Let this be a night of setting down, knowing that a clean start is being made for you while you rest. Your body knows the way to sleep the way a river knows the sea. You have never had to teach it. Beneath all the thinking, an old and certain wisdom is already turning down the lights, already opening the quiet channels, already beginning the slow work of the night. You can stop trying to find the way. The way is finding you. Trust the deep knowing beneath your thoughts, and let it lead you gently down. There is nothing here you need to hold on to. Not the day, not the worry, not even the wish to sleep. Each thing you release makes the tide inside you move a little more freely. Holding is the daytime work, and the day is over now. This is the hour of open hands. Let the last small grip loosen from your mind, and feel how much lighter you become the moment there is nothing left to carry. What happens in you now is a kind of quiet love, the body caring for itself without being asked. No reward is expected. No thanks are needed. The fluid moves and the mind clears simply because you are worth the tending. You do not have to deserve it. You do not have to notice it. You need only let it happen. Tonight, receive the care that is already reaching toward you, and let yourself be cared for. Feel the weight of the whole day setting down at last. The shoulders you held high, the jaw you kept tight, the thoughts you carried from room to room. All of it can rest on the surface beneath you now. You are not holding the day up anymore. The night has taken it. Let your body grow heavy where it lies, and let the heaviness be a homecoming. The deep relief of finally being allowed to stop. Somewhere ahead, a morning is quietly being made ready for you. Its page rinsed and waiting. Its light a little clearer than the day before. You do not have to reach for it or hurry toward it. It comes on its own, carried in on the same slow tide moving through you now. Tonight belongs to the clearing. Tomorrow belongs to what the clearing leaves behind. Rest here, between them, with nothing left to do. The mist behind your eyes is thinning even as you lie here. You cannot see it go, and you do not need to. The heaviness that felt like it would never lift is already lifting. In the smallest, softest way, hour by quiet hour. There is no moment you need to catch, no effort you need to make. There is only a fog dissolving gently into a clear and open dark. Let it. Let it all grow clear. This is a rest that tends you, not a rest you tend. You are not on watch tonight. You are not keeping anything running. For once, the caring flows the other way, toward you, around you, through the quiet channels of your mind. You can lay down every task, even the task of resting well. The night has that one too. Simply be here, held and cleared, while the tending moves softly on without you. Let yourself dissolve into the slow current of the hour. There is no edge to hold, no shape to keep, only a gentle downward drift, like a leaf settling onto still water. The stream inside you moves, and you move with it, softer and softer, deeper and deeper. You do not have to arrive anywhere. You only have to let go of the shore. Feel the loosening, and let the current carry you the rest of the way. Inside you, a quiet tide is moving through the dark, clearing, softening, returning everything to peace. And it asks nothing of you at all. This is the answer the whole night has been reaching toward. What happens as you sink into sleep is not something you do. It is something done for you, tenderly, in the deep and gentle hours. Let the tide have you now. Let it move, and let yourself be carried into rest. You do not have to earn the rest that already tends you. Nothing tonight is asked of you but this: to stop and be held. The care was never a reward for a good enough day. It was always simply yours, waiting for the moment you would finally set the day down and let it in. You are allowed to be washed clean. You are allowed to be light again. Sleep now. You were always worth the tending. An hour ago, your head felt heavy and clouded, and you wondered what could ever wash that fog away. Now you know it was never yours to wash. We followed the spaces between your brain cells as they widened in deep sleep, easing open to let the fluid move. We watched the chemical of watchfulness fall as alertness let go, and the falling itself set the tide free. What began as a heavy, foggy head became a mind that quietly clears itself in the dark, needing nothing from you but your willingness to stop. Here is what the night has been showing all along. While you slept, you were never idle. The dark was not empty. It was tending you, clearing you, keeping you whole while you rested. A heavy head can keep you awake, afraid of what the fog is taking. Should this quiet hour have loosened some of that weight, a gentle like, subscribe, or share helps another tired mind find the same soft clearing. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. somewhere behind your closed eyes. A slow stream is moving through the narrow spaces of your brain, carrying the day quietly away. It needs no direction from you. It began the moment you stopped adding to it, and it flows the way water always flows towards stillness. Let your whole self dissolve into that gentle sweep. Let everything you carried loosen and drift into the deep quiet, softening as it goes. You never had to earn this. The clearing was always yours, moving through you now, tending what your hands could never reach. You can allow these last thoughts to drift now, like marks rinsing from a clean, quiet page. Let your body grow heavy where it lies. Sleep carries you into the tending you were never meant to supervise. The Relaxing Body Science Facts to Fall Asleep To playlist has spent many hours near the quiet machinery of the body. And one question waits. What else is your body mending in the hours you finally let it? That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Rest well, weary one. You do not have to be awake for the care already washing you clean, where science becomes the softest place to rest. Good night.